Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams. Today's video is going to be a tea time chat about why not all makeup is available everywhere, and I'm going to be sharing my makeup shopping tips. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. This video is an ongoing series where I like to have a chat with you guys about topics that I see going on either in my comment section or other creators are talking about it in the beauty community, and just sort of having a conversation with you. I always love reading your comments, so definitely interact with the video by leaving your thoughts down below. And in today's video, I just wanted to come on here to provide context as to why certain products may be difficult for you to find. There's a couple of topics I'd like to get into, and then I want to end the video with my makeup shopping tips of how I, as someone who lives in the European Union, I live in the Netherlands, how I go about shopping for makeup, and maybe that can help you in some way, shape, or form. But before we do that, it may be good to know that I have fair skin with a cool to neutral undertone, and that greatly skews my makeup preferences. I also have been doing this for quite some time, so I have a lot of thoughts about a lot of things because I have been reviewing makeup for more than a decade, and my channel is all about eyeshadow palettes, accessories, and getting the use out of your makeup. So if you're here for that, then I hope you'd like to join the Snow Angel family by clicking subscribe down below. So yes, let's unpack the main topics of this video. So I think there are three main topics that we need to discuss, which is marketing, which is ingredients, and shipping, because I think that's the three main reasons why you may or may not be able to find certain things. So yeah, this is a video idea that came to me because a lot of people are always asking me where they can find certain things. A lot of my reviews that I tend to do on this channel are about Essence and Catrice makeup, which are by the same company, Cosnova, which is a German brand, and since the Netherlands is next to Germany, we can usually quite easily get those products here very quickly because the products tend to be released here first and then it is spread out to other territories. Which means that, for instance, if you're in the US, you cannot find those products. And for instance, Essence US releases products that we cannot get over here. So I definitely wanted to sort of unpack that and why I think those things happen. Plus, I always get comments from people who live in the European Union as well, who ask me like, how do you get ColourPop? How do you buy this? How do you buy that? So I just wanted to sort of put that all together in one video to help to understand why it may be difficult for you to find certain things that I or other creators show on their channels, depending on where they live, and to also provide you my tips to how I like going about it. And some of that has to do with, you know, just allowing yourself to spend money on certain things as well. But we get to that when we get to that. So I already mentioned that I think there are three main reasons why you may not be able to find everything you'd hope to get that I or other creators are showing on their channels: marketing, ingredients, and shipping. So let me get to marketing first, because that is the first topic I'd like to unpack. A lot of the reasons why you cannot buy certain things at all times in every single country around the world has to do with marketing more so than anything. Companies will cater their products to a certain profile that they have in mind. It's usually called a persona, and that's their like ideal customer who they are making their products for. And there's very often a location added into that persona, like where does this person live? And very often, if a company is located in a certain country, their ideal person who they would like to sell to is also from that same country. So that's, for instance, why a lot of, you know, US indie brands, for instance, just tend to have better deals for US customers than they do for European ones. Some of that has to do with shipping, but there's definitely a marketing aspect to it as well. This has to, you know, this goes into like shade ranges not being available everywhere. It goes into, you know, products maybe being able, you know, getting them here first from a brand like Essence and Catrice, and that some of those products are released a lot later in other continents. It also has to do with that. But of course, we are living in a globalized world, and you can see a lot of what is available. But I think that what a lot of people are forgetting is that this visibility of being able to see that products are available in location A but not in location B is something that before the internet, before these online communities where enthusiasts can gather and talk to each other from across the world, is like a pretty recent thing. So the fact that you see something being available and it not being available to you has actually been part of how businesses are being run for absolutely decades. And I always like making comparisons in these videos with things that aren't makeup, but this has been going on in the food industry, in like the entertainment industry for the longest time. Movies were not available here if they were from the US. A lot of like major releases would be winning Oscars and they hadn't even been in cinemas here way back in the day. But then this thing started happening called pirating. And then the movie industry kind of realized that they had to be a bit quicker with their releases so that, you know, if something had already been available in the US, people in the EU would still be going to, you know, the cinema to actually see the movie, because a lot of people over here knew at a certain point that these movies were released 2, 3, sometimes even 6 months before we ever got to see them. And this is still the case with some movies. I know that, you know, sometimes it has to do with like censorships and like laws and regulations in certain countries before these movies can be shown. So it still happens, but especially in the movie industry, it has started to happen to a much lesser degree than it used to. And now you can usually find things upon release quite quickly, or they are released around Oscar time, so that the buzz of the Oscars is also what gets people to go to the cinemas over here. But for instance, when it comes to food, if you've traveled, there may be foods that everybody knows. You know, you have your McDonald's and your Coca-Cola and M&M's, which are really gigantic international brands, but they change the flavors to cater to the local clientele. So if you are used to, you know, M&Ms in the US are very different to M&Ms and the way they taste over here, for instance. That's something I could not, like, I lost so much weight when I was in the US simply because a lot of the candy and like the things I like a lot that are also available over there just didn't taste the same, and I didn't like the taste of the way things were sweetened in the US because they use very different sweeteners over there. Same thing with Coca-Cola. That has been changed, and this is actually something that I also saw on TikTok, where people comment on what Fanta actually looks like in the US compared to over here. Fanta looks orange over here and also in places like France because there's actual orange in the product, whereas in the US it's much more artificial and a lot of things are actually taken out. And I actually watched a TikTok the other day from someone who went to Japan and had McDonald's over there, and even things like their French fries and things will taste differently because very often the products are also made. If you go to Starbucks, for instance, it's gonna taste slightly different because they use local produce. Like the milk that you get in a Starbucks drink over here is going to be Dutch milk, and that's been produced in a different way than it's done in the US. So that always tastes a little bit differently than compared to anything. And that's all down to things being, you know, adapted to local tastes, things being adapted to local timing, like when will these people go? So that definitely also goes, I think, for makeup. And I know that coming from a country where wearing makeup like this isn't necessarily a thing, sometimes that's shocking to people because a lot of people know that Nikki Tutorials is from the Netherlands. And I think that that's why people have this, like, who aren't from the Netherlands, have this idea of what people might be wearing in terms of makeup. But in general, in the Netherlands, there are only 2 products that sell well countrywide, which is mascara and foundation. Most Dutch women don't wear a full face of makeup. Ever. Like, it's very, very bare bones, very minimal. Most people don't even wear that. So the makeup buying audience and of what we see online is just very different to what is actually going on in stores, which is why certain brands that maybe within the beauty community aren't necessarily noticed or are deemed as boring still do very well because they have a actual, like, very standard base of people who go back and buy the same products when they run out. I think there are different worlds within the makeup realm that maybe as online beauty creators, we don't really see. And we don't really take into account when it comes to our recommendations as well sometimes. So I think that that's another thing to be very mindful of, is that we as beauty enthusiasts aren't the only people buying makeup, and that there's a very different different way of thinking about makeup and buying makeup that also goes into it. So that's the marketing aspect that I see for like being a reason why you may not be able to get Essence and Catrice the minute it comes out over here. Why you cannot get it in the US, it's just because you're not the target audience. The target audience for Essence and Catrice is definitely EU based. And you know, they have been able to get a foothold getting started in the US, but in the US there's a lot more competition. Both brands used to be available at Ulta, now they are no longer there. I think the best way to get Catrice and Essence is actually in the US through their official websites, which over here they don't even have. In the Netherlands, there is no official Catrice or Essence website where you can buy the product. You can see products on their website, but then once you put things in a cart, it actually redirects you to other websites that sell the products, because the products are everywhere over here. Like every drugstore sells Essence and Catrice, and some of them only sell a little bit because they're a smaller store, but then you have larger stores that have the full display. So it's a little bit like, you know, your Maybellines and L'Oreals like you have over here. That's the level where they are at here, and they are more on the affordable end of the spectrum, like an e.l.f. or a Wet n Wild would be in the US. So for us, they are much more easily accessible to begin with, and because they are more easily accessible, we can also buy them online from our like local drugstore and other places that sell it as well. So they're a bit more widespread. And that's why they focus here, because that's where they tend to make the most money. And like the US is definitely an afterthought for them. Like a lot of US brands actually don't factor in the fact that, you know, in the EU we would also like to buy them. Milano, Wet n Wild, these kind of brands just don't, they're just not readily available over here. I have to go online to find them through like specialized makeup websites that specialize in selling these brands that we cannot get. I'm not sure if that's making sense. So there's definitely that's going into it. So for me, I think marketing is the #1 reason why we cannot buy everything everywhere. You're just not part of the marketing plan. And as businesses grow and there's more money put into the business, they can grow their market. They can start, you know, becoming part of other markets that maybe they're not being sold at yet. And that's part of the expansion. But very often it's just not viable for a business to be available everywhere, all in one go in stores, etc. It's just incredibly expensive to do that. So a lot of businesses cannot do that. And if the business is not making enough money, then they also just disappear, like what happened to Sephora over here. So a decade ago, I think by now, oh, I feel old when I say that, but we used to have Sephora in the Netherlands. It was a shop-in-shop concept in a large department store, and even that department store is no longer around. They went bankrupt, and I think actually Sephora disappearing from that department store was like the start of the end for that department store as well, because it just wasn't like Sephora actually made the choice of focusing more so on the Asian market than having stores in the Netherlands, because they just weren't making enough money compared to other territories. I think you can find Sephora. I mean, they've now opened up stores in the UK as well. So you can find them in a lot of European countries, just not the Netherlands, because we're just too small of a fish and they couldn't make enough money. Maybe they'll try it again in the future, who knows? But so far, Sephora is just not a thing here. It just doesn't, it's not here. We have to go to Germany, we have to go to France, the UK is an option, Spain has it, Italy has it, Sweden has it. So there's a lot of countries within the EU that have Sephora. And then we cannot even get all the brands that you can get in US Sephora very often as well. So that's just part of it as well. Like, is the market viable for the company to be a part of. And that's a choice that the company makes based on sales. It's all about money. So yeah, marketing is definitely very, very important. But the second point is also ingredients, or how products are made. Different territories have different rules and regulations of how things can be made. This also goes for the food example that I already shared with you before. You know, in the US, food is produced in a very different way. There are different laws and regulations that go into it, which is another reason why, you know, a lot of foods are manufactured in a different way compared to what, you know, the European Union has. And with makeup, it's no different. I definitely think that certain brands that we cannot get here, or that took a long time to get here, was due to it not being up to the standard of the European Union. The European Union is quite strict in what can and cannot go. There are a lot of things actually that already go into it. So one brand, for instance, that comes to mind that took a very long time to get here was a brand like Anastasia. Everybody in the US, like Mono Renaissance, when that was hyped up, but the brand was just not available in the European Union. It took a long time for them to become available beyond their brow products. And it probably had to do with things just not being approved by European regulations, or maybe that the European regulations were pending, you know, being approved and them being able to sell their product. And then it also took a while for the brand to have a warehouse over here to allow people to actually be able to like make the shipping and handling a little easier as well. So that's another thing that we're going to unpack in a minute. So it took a long time for that brand to really put all of its feelers out around the European Union. And then of course the products were also a lot more expensive than they were in the US. When Modern Renaissance, when that launched, it was like $42, and over here, which like in euros, it would be like 39, 40 euros, given the rates and the tax that you would have to pay. But over here, everything is included. You know, you don't pay the tax afterwards. But yeah, including tax, including everything, that exact same palette retailed for 56 euros. So it was a 15 euro markup by the time it became available here. And then, you know, everybody's raving about, oh, it's amazing quality and whatever. Yeah, for $42, it was amazing quality. But for the price of a naked palette, it perhaps wasn't necessarily as good as a naked palette. So I've always felt a little less excited about Anastasia palettes for that reason. And now their price point seems to be the same here as it is in the US. So that also depends. That also, again, has to do with marketing. Like price is one of the marketing strategy things. Like what price do you then pay? And then you have to factor in, you know, the fact that the products need to be shipped over here, and that, you know, you perhaps need additional testing done to get your products on the market over here. And as a consumer, you're going to pay for that. So that's definitely something that happened in the past. A brand like ColourPop is not available in the European Union, and I think that's due to the fact that the way ColourPop products are made aren't necessarily in line with European Union consumer laws. I think that's definitely part of it. And, you know, sometimes you'll get brands like Juvia's Place, for instance, used to be available through some European retailers. They were, you know, once that contract was fulfilled, they decided to not do it again. There were rumors for a while that there was going to be a European Juvia's Place website, but I think that Brexit kind of got in the way of that, because that's a whole other ballpark there as well. I know, for instance, that there are brands that used to ship to the UK, but now it's so expensive for certain indie brands to get the approval to sell the product in the United Kingdom that actually the United Kingdom is now like the weird one out. Like Menagerie no longer ships to the United Kingdom because of Brexit, because now every company that wants to do business with the UK needs to be approved again by the UK government. And that a lot of brands are like, I'm not going to file the paperwork. I'm not going to do this. Another thing here happened actually to us again with Sephora. So while there, for a few years, we could actually shop through US Sephora as European Union customers. But then the European Union decided to have stricter privacy laws, and then Sephora was like, you're just gonna have to go through the French website. So if I type in Sephora US, I'm automatically being redirected to the French website because I can no longer have a look at that. Same thing with Ulta. I cannot access the Ulta website because I'm blocked because I'm in the European Union. And that has to do with like the legislation that a European Union website has to adhere to compared to what the laws are in the US. So laws and regulations, and also like formulations and all of the like consumer laws and getting testing done and what like standards things have to adhere to definitely goes into whether a product can be sold in your country. And that is another reason why there may be a block, why you cannot access certain websites, or why certain products just aren't shipped to your country, because that's just another reason why you know, those rules and regulations are also in place to keep people safe. And different territories just have different ideas of what it means to create a safe product. And the European Union is, I think, one of the stricter ones. So very often the restriction is more so for people living here than in other parts of the world, it seems. So that's a bummer, but you know, in a way it's also there to keep us safe. So I don't really mind that. But that's a reason why product launches can be pushed back over here, why maybe we cannot get the product straight away, even if it is available, because just additional testing needs to be done for it to become available in stores here. However, and this brings me to the third point, this has to do with shipping. So of course we live in a global market, global economy. Very often if you're willing to pay for things, you can get things shipped over if you have access to things. I mean, there's a lot of things you can actually get through US Amazon that maybe, or you know, an eBay or whatever. There are ways to get your hands on things if you really, really want it. A lot of brands have websites that are registered in the United States, so you can order through them and get it through the European Union. Same thing for people in the US. You can buy Esses and Catrice through European retailers. You have access to things like Lico or Lyco. I'm never sure how to say it, but I believe they ship internationally. So you can get your hands on Esses and Catrice stuff. The only problem is, are you willing to pay the fees? This is another comment that I get sometimes if I show things from like Glam Shop or Gloss Gods. These are EU-based indie brands, and for me that's a lot more affordable than buying things from US indie brands. And so if you're willing to pay more, then you can get your hands on things. However, a lot of people find that very expensive because A, you have to pay for international shipping fees, which, I mean, I don't necessarily mind paying that because that's just what it costs to have things shipped to your country. And of course, some, especially smaller indie brands, don't sell enough to have like a deal with a postal service to be able to bring the shipping down like ColourPop, for instance, does have. They can offer free shipping over a certain amount of money because they simply sell enough units. However, of course, there is a cost to having things shipped halfway across the world. So I'm not sure if it's entirely fair. And I've already mentioned in the past how China, like things shipped from China, are cheaper because China is part of a special package deal, as it's still listed as a developing country, I believe, and that's why they don't have to charge as much for shipping as the US, for instance, does. So that's why if you buy something through YesStyle, or if a brand has their fulfillment station in Hong Kong, which a lot of brands like Odin's Eye and Kaleidos actually have, it's a lot cheaper to get those products to you than if they actually have their warehouse in the US or the European Union. That's just the way it goes. So it also has to do like, where is the warehouse located? And especially with Brexit, this has been a thing. I think it's more an issue for people in the UK shopping in the EU than it is for EU customers shopping in the UK. Because the EU is just a much bigger territory. So a lot of UK businesses would lose so much business if they were to lose European customers. That, for instance, places like Call Beauty and Beauty Bay, like the prices have gone up since Brexit over there, because I think instead of saying, oh, we charge you this much for shipping, they just kind of factor it in the product price. But a lot of websites actually that used to be located in the UK started having warehouses for shipping in the European Union so that customers don't have to pay for things. And I think the other way round hasn't really happened. And that's because the UK is no longer part of the European Union and they can no longer negotiate the same kind of deals as they used to be able to before. So I think that's definitely part of it as well. So it has to do a lot with contracts and where is the warehouse located, how much you have to pay for shipping and handling fees. And I think that that's the thing that, you know, a lot of things are available to you. You can either get it through official websites or very often, especially here in the European Union, you can get things through like these conglomerate kind of websites that sell multiple brands. So one that I use a lot is a Dutch one. Actually, they do ship internationally, but again, you'd have to pay for shipping and handling fees. They're called Boozy Shop. And things like Lico, Notino, Cosmetic for Less, like there are these like websites that have a lot of brands like located together that very often will allow you to get your hands on things as well. And some of those websites do sell internationally as well. So even if you're not in the EU, some of those websites do allow you to shop through them. But I think there's a restriction on, for instance, Cosmetic for Less and things. So the last point I therefore have to mention is how I go about shopping and like the kind of websites I like to use and doing that. So one of the things that, of course, you need to factor in is, are you willing to pay for the shipping and handling fees? And some people find that too expensive, so they wait. And very often you do have these websites that sell quite a lot of brands in one go, like places like Beauty Bay, Cult Beauty, Feel Unique, Look Fantastic, Lyco, Notino, Cosmetic for Less. Boozy Shop is one that I like to use. They're based in the Netherlands. And a lot of these websites, Beautylish is a US one, by the way. And they are these websites that, like Sephora, sell a lot of different brands. So I'll make a list in the description box in case you'd like to check them out and see if they ship to your territory, because I don't always know. But that's where I sort of like go for certain brands as well, because Cult Beauty will have this brand and then Beauty Bay will have that brand and this brand will be over there. And I sort of like try to figure out which one is best. And a website that a lot of people have been recommending I check out recently is a website called Monolith. And Monolith is a website that actually sells a lot of US indie brands. Unearthly is on there, Adept is on there, Is Beauté is on there. So a lot of people have been saying in the comments, like, you should shop through there because it's much cheaper. It actually isn't. So I tend to still buy a lot of US indie brands directly through their website. I think it's good to have a website like Monolith on there, but just know that you're paying for far more for the product than what it goes for on the US website. Not all brands I have seen on there are marked up. Unearthly seems to be quite on the same point as on the US website, so that may be roughly as expensive or a little bit cheaper if you factor in the shipping and handling fees. But for instance, one of the palettes on there is the Adept Minka palette, which I have. And I compared the price points, thinking of how much I roughly paid, including all of the shipping and handling fees. And if I were to buy just this one palette through Monolith, it would be as expensive as getting it from the brand directly in the US because of the markup. So the Adept Minka on the Adept website is about $50 or $52. At the moment, the currency for the dollar to euro exchange rate is actually quite favorable to the euro. So if you're in a euro-based country, then that's actually a little bit cheaper. So it's around like 48, 49, maybe 50 euros or so. At least it was when I checked. And on the Monolith website, the palette retails for 72. So it's at least a 20 euro markup that we're looking at. And then that website ships to the Netherlands for over 10 euros, which would mean I would buy this palette at like 82 at least. 82 euros, and that including all of the shipping and handling fees from Adept is roughly what I paid for it as well. So for me, it's then not worth it because Monolith also doesn't get the releases from the brands as quickly as the brands release them. So the brand will have a release and then it takes about a couple of weeks for it to get to Monolith. By that time, you'll probably already have the product in your hands if you buy it through the brand directly. Not all brands are on there, of course. They do have a threshold for free shipping, but it is quite high, I have found, and so therefore it's not always going to be worth it. If you're buying just one palette, depending on the brand, it's worth checking out the official website still just to see if the palette on Monolith isn't incredibly marked up. It's not the case for all of the products on there, but some of the products I had a look at were marked up quite dramatically compared to what the official retail price is in the US. So that's definitely something to look into. And it's just, you know, you need to pick and choose based on your budget. And I think that that's another reason why a lot of people get upset if you show products that they cannot get. Oh, but it's so much more expensive, or it's this much more expensive, it's no longer worth it. I'm like, it needs to be worth it to you. And the only person who can decide that is you. I cannot see how much money you have in your bank account and how much money you can spend on makeup. Your personal budget is your responsibility, and there's no reason why you should therefore compare yourself to someone like me who now, because I make a little bit of AdSense money, I can put that back into the channel and I can use it to buy product. It's the way it goes, and therefore it may be a bit easier for me to spend that money on it rather than if I had to put my own paycheck towards it. So I think there's different things that factor into it that, you know, might make something affordable or worth it to you than the way I have to take that decision. So it's all personal preference, and like, are you willing to pay for the additional fees? Yes or no? If not, if you find that then ColourPop is no longer worth it, then ColourPop is no longer worth it for you, and you should not be buying it just because everybody else is talking about it. And that, I think, is the whole crux of this entire situation, is because we see everything that creators show us, it also creates a need in us for things that maybe we don't necessarily need to own. Just saying. So be mindful, plan, budget carefully, and then I think you can navigate these waters quite easily. It's definitely what I try to do as well, and that's why I never go like, oh, this is the best thing ever, and that's why I will always say like, oh, but this, you know, this is good, but it may be difficult, especially when I do my like new makeup releases. I always say like, I don't think this is going to be worth it for me because of the shipping and handling fees. It's just not unique enough for me to own it, and then I will just skip the product. That's usually what happens. Or for instance, if a product is released much later over here than it is somewhere else, I may just forget about that it even existed. And then by the time it's here, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like, oh, by now I don't really need that anymore. So that's another reason why I think it's also good to have this, like, you know, to not have everything available to you at all times. I think that's also a way to protect ourselves from overspending, from having too much. We don't need to try everything because not everything is going to be right for us to begin with. So I think it's another helpful way for us to be able to make better decisions. And just because you cannot get it doesn't mean that it's something you should have to get. That's just, you know, not everything is worth hunting down. I have found that out the hard way. I've done some videos this year where I tried some e.l.f., Makeup Revolution, and NYX again. Brands that a lot of people rave about a lot online. Charlotte Tilbury is another one. And at the end of the day, I just end up decluttering a lot of it because I'm like, it's not worth it. It's just not quite right for me. And I know that now. So now I'm like, I don't really need to fall for the hype again. I just don't. So yeah, that's everything I wanted to share with you today in this video. Leave me your thoughts in a comment down below. I would love to know how you feel about these things, how you like to go about shopping for makeup. And then, yeah, I would love to hear all of your thoughts. Thumbs up this video in the meantime. And if you'd like to stay tuned for more, then I hope you'd like to subscribe. I would come back on here 4 days a week to show you like lots of new content. So I hope you're here for that. I was a little MIA the past couple of weeks because I was a bit busy and I just didn't have enough pre-filmed to have all the videos ready. Usually I can pre-film in like short vacations and stuff. I work in education, so we have like spring break and things. So I use my shorter vacations to get ahead of schedule, and I just didn't manage it this time around. So that's why I just didn't have enough lying on the shelf. I didn't have time to film, and that's where the time went. So I just decided to like not post because that's also okay. So if you, in case you were wondering where I was at, that's what happened. So thanks so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you in my next one. Bye-bye.